You try to ignore it. You distract yourself. You tell yourself that feelings can be misleading, that emotions rise and fall, that faith shouldn't be confused with fantasy. Yet somehow, no matter how far you run from the thought, that same peace keeps returning. Not excitement, not obsession, peace. A calm certainty that doesn't rush you, doesn't pressure you, doesn't manipulate you. It simply waits for you to notice it. This is how God often speaks when it comes to matters of covenant. Because when God is involved, He doesn't need chaos to get your attention. He uses alignment. It starts subtly. A name that keeps appearing in conversations you weren't part of. A verse that seems to answer a question you never asked out loud. A prayer you prayed once, maybe even reluctantly, that keeps unfolding in ways you didn't plan. You begin to notice patterns, but not the kind that feel forced or desperate. These patterns feel intentional, like pieces of a puzzle being placed not by your hands, but by something far more precise. And then come the dreams. Not the random kind, not the ones born of longing or loneliness. These dreams carry weight. They leave you waking up with a sense of purpose rather than confusion. In them, you don't feel lost or chasing. You feel aligned. You feel shown, not seduced. There's no anxiety in these dreams, no fear of loss. Just a quiet knowing, as if your spirit recognizes something before your mind can catch up. Scripture tells us that God speaks through dreams and visions, but what many people don't realize is that He also speaks through consistency. When the same message returns without your effort, without your manipulation, without your control, that's not imagination. That's confirmation. In the encounters, those unlikely, almost unbelievable meetings, you run into each other at moments that make no sense statistically. The timing is never perfect, but it's always precise. Just when you were about to let go. Just when you decided to move on. Just when you told God, if this isn't from you, please take it away. And instead of disappearing, the connection deepens, not emotionally at first, but spiritually. You don't even have to talk much. Sometimes it's a look. Sometimes it's a silence that feels more honest than words. Sometimes it's the way your guard drops without you trying. You notice that you're not performing. You're not proving. You're not pretending. You're just present. That's another sign people often overlook. When God is preparing two people to walk together for a greater purpose, He removes the need for masks. You don't feel like you have to impress them. You don't feel smaller or larger than who you are. You feel seen without being exposed. Known without being consumed. And that quiet certainty, oh, that certainty. It doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't try to convince anyone else. It simply exists within you, steady and grounded. It defies logic because it wasn't born from logic. It was planted deeper than your thoughts. It sits in your spirit, untouched by doubt even when your mind spirals. You may question it intellectually, but you can't uproot it emotionally. You can walk away physically, but something in you stays connected. Not in a dependent way. In a purposeful way, as if your lives are running on parallel tracks that keep bending toward the same horizon. This is what happens when something has already been written in heavenly places. The Bible speaks of God ordaining steps, of Him knitting together destinies before we ever take our first breath. When He chooses to unite two hearts, it's never just for romance. It's for assignment, for growth, for refinement, for impact that reaches far beyond the two people involved. That's why resistance often shows up before union, delays, misunderstandings, seasons of silence, external obstacles that make you question whether you heard God correctly. But here's the truth many people don't want to hear. If the enemy can't destroy a God-ordained union, he will try to delay it, confuse it, or exhaust the people involved so they give up on their own. And yet, even in the delay, God keeps confirming. You hear the same message from different sources who don't know each other. You receive warnings that don't instill fear but clarity. You're corrected, refined, prepared. God starts working on your character more than your circumstances. He exposes wounds you didn't know you were carrying. He teaches you patience, discernment, and humility, not so you can earn the relationship, but so you can sustain it. Because divine unions aren't built on chemistry alone. They're built on alignment. You begin to notice that this person doesn't pull you away from God, they draw you closer, even when they're not present. Your prayer life deepens. Your standards rise. Your tolerance for shallow connections fades. You become more intentional, more aware of what love actually requires. And here's the part that often confirms everything: you're willing to surrender the outcome. That's when you know it's real. When you can look at God and say, if this is from you, I trust you. And if it's not, I trust you enough to take it away, and yet the peace remains. That's not attachment. That's faith. That's knowing that whatever God is doing, He's doing it with purpose, not to tease your heart but to prepare it. You stop trying to control the timeline. You stop forcing conversations. You stop chasing clarity from people when God has already given it to your spirit. You learn to wait without stagnating, to hope without idolizing, to love without possessing. Because divine love doesn't cage, it calls. And slowly, you realize that God hasn't just been moving circumstances around you. He's been moving things within you. Healing old fears, dismantling unhealthy patterns, teaching you how to love from wholeness instead of lack. By the time the confirmation becomes undeniable, you're not desperate for it anymore. You're ready for it. That's how you know God is in it. So now the question isn't whether the signs are real. They are. The question is whether you're ready to recognize them without rushing them. Whether you're willing to trust God's timing as much as you trust His promise. Whether you can hold this revelation with humility instead of entitlement. Because when God chooses someone to walk by your side, it's not just about who they are to you, it's about who you become together. Are you ready to listen without forcing? To wait without doubting? To love without fear? Are you ready to recognize the divine signs, not as a guarantee of comfort, but as an invitation to purpose? Because when God confirms, He doesn't do it to confuse you. He does it to prepare you. And when the time comes, you won't need to be convinced. You'll simply know. There comes a moment when the knowing settles so deeply within you that you stop searching for proof. You no longer need reassurance from signs, sermons, or synchronicities because something steadier has taken root. It's not excitement anymore, it's alignment. And alignment doesn't rush, it anchors. You start to notice how your reactions change. Situations that once triggered anxiety no longer have the same power over you. Conversations about the future don't feel threatening. Even uncertainty loses its sharp edge. You realize that whether this person is physically near or far, something essential has already been established in the unseen. And that realization changes how you move through the world. You become more patient, not because you're forcing yourself to wait, but because waiting no longer feels empty. It feels purposeful. Every day becomes part of preparation rather than punishment. You begin to understand that God is not withholding love from you, He's refining your capacity to hold it without breaking. This is where many people get uncomfortable. Because we are taught to equate love with immediacy, with constant communication, with visible progress. But divine love doesn't follow human urgency. It follows eternal order. And eternal order often looks slow to those who don't understand what's being built beneath the surface. You may even experience moments where everything goes quiet. No signs, no dreams, no emotional highs, just stillness. And strangely, the stillness doesn't scare you. It confirms you. Because when something is real, it doesn't need constant validation. God doesn't keep shouting once He knows you've heard Him. Sometimes silence is His way of saying, trust me now. In that silence, your faith matures. You stop clinging to outcomes and start trusting character, God's character. You remember His track record in your life. The doors He closed that once disappointed you but later protected you. The prayers He didn't answer the way you wanted but answered the way you needed. You realize this situation is no different. And then, subtly, God begins to show you something else: the cost. Not the cost in fear, but the cost in responsibility. Because when God joins two people for a greater purpose, He doesn't just give affection, He gives assignment. He doesn't just unite hearts, he entrusts influence. The relationship becomes a place where healing flows outward, not just inward. And that means both people must be willing to grow beyond their comfort zones. You start seeing areas in yourself that need maturity. Patterns that can't come with you into the next season. Defense mechanisms that once kept you safe but now limit your intimacy. God doesn't expose these things to shame you. He reveals them to free you. Because divine union requires emotional honesty. Not perfection, honesty. You begin to understand that love isn't proven by intensity, but by consistency. By the willingness to choose growth over ego, truth over comfort, obedience over impulse. And you realize that God is shaping you into someone who can love without losing themselves, who can commit without controlling, who can stand firm without hardening their heart. At times, you may feel tested. Moments arise where you're tempted to settle for something easier, something available, something that requires less faith. And you could. Nothing stops you except the quiet resistance in your spirit. That same peace you felt before now acts like a boundary. It doesn't condemn you, it redirects you. You understand then that discernment is not about judging others. It's about honoring what God has already shown you. And the more you honor it, the clearer things become. You start to notice how other connections feel forced by comparison. Conversations feel shallow. Promises feel empty. Even attraction feels incomplete when it lacks spiritual resonance. You're not arrogant about it. You're not detached from humanity. You're just aware that your heart has been tuned to a different frequency. This awareness brings a different kind of loneliness, not the ache of being alone, but the ache of waiting for something meaningful. And yet, even that ache is softened by trust. You're no longer asking, will this happen? You're asking, who am I becoming while I wait? Because deep down, you know that God is preparing both of you simultaneously, even if your journeys look nothing alike. What you can't see, He's aligning. What you can't control, He's orchestrating. And what you don't understand, He's protecting. Sometimes you sense this person praying for you without knowing it. Sometimes you feel strengthened for no obvious reason. Sometimes you're pulled back from decisions that would have altered your path irreversibly. These aren't coincidences, they're coverings. God guards what He intends to use. And as time passes, you realize that this journey has already changed you, regardless of how the story unfolds. You love more wisely now. You trust more deeply. You listen more carefully, to God, to others, to yourself. You've learned that faith is not passive, it's active surrender. You stop asking God to explain everything. You start asking Him to lead you through it. This is where readiness is born. Not readiness to receive a person, but readiness to steward a calling together. Readiness to build, to endure, to forgive, to serve. Readiness to love someone not as an idol, not as a fantasy, but as a partner in purpose. You understand that when the moment comes, whether quietly or dramatically, you won't need signs anymore. Recognition will be instant. Peace will confirm it before words ever do. And even then, you won't rush ahead of God. You'll walk with Him, because you've learned that divine timing doesn't arrive with urgency. It arrives with clarity. So if you're here now, standing in this space between promise and fulfillment, know this, you're not behind. You're not confused. You're not imagining things. You're being prepared. Prepared to recognize love without fear. Prepared to choose obedience over impatience. Prepared to walk beside someone not because you need them, but because God entrusted them to you. And when that day comes, you won't look back and say, I wish it happened sooner. You'll say, now I understand why it couldn't have happened any other way. There is a sacred weight to that understanding once it fully settles into your bones. It changes how you interpret time itself. Days no longer feel like obstacles between you and fulfillment, but like intentional spaces where God is finishing work that cannot be rushed. You begin to see that divine timing is not delay, it is protection layered with precision. You notice how your prayers evolve. They are no longer desperate requests for answers but quiet conversations shaped by trust. You stop asking God to reveal the entire plan and start asking Him to shape your heart for whatever role you are meant to play. This shift is subtle, yet it marks the moment you move from longing into alignment. And alignment has a cost few people talk about. It requires you to let go of narratives you once clung to for comfort. The idea that love must arrive dramatically. That certainty must come with constant emotional highs. That God's will always feel easy. In reality, God often confirms His will through steadiness, not stimulation. Through peace that remains even when nothing seems to be happening. You begin to realize that the reason this connection feels different is because it isn't feeding your ego, it's refining your spirit. It doesn't make you feel superior, it makes you more honest. It doesn't inflate your identity, it grounds it. You're not trying to be chosen anymore. You already know you are called. There are moments when the memory of this person surfaces unexpectedly, not as a distraction, but as a reminder. Not as longing, but as reassurance. It feels less like missing someone and more like being anchored to something meaningful. You can function fully without them, yet something within you acknowledges that life will eventually be shared. This paradox used to confuse you. Now it steadies you. Because divine love does not create dependency. It creates capacity. It expands your ability to give, to listen, to endure. It strengthens your emotional spine so that when union happens, it does not collapse. Under pressure, you also begin to see how God shields you from premature attachment. There are moments when circumstances could have brought you closer too soon, but something always intervened. A pause, a redirection, a necessary distance, not because the connection was wrong, but because the timing was incomplete. God is meticulous with what He values. He knows that love revealed too early can be mishandled, misunderstood, or idolized. So He teaches you restraint. He teaches you reverence. He teaches you to honor what has been shown without trying to possess it. This lesson alone reshapes you. You stop trying to figure out the person. You stop assigning roles or expectations. You allow God to reveal who they are in His time, just as He is revealing who you are becoming. You trust that whatever is real will not be threatened by patience. And then comes a deeper layer of preparation, surrendering your assumptions. You may have imagined how this union would look, how it would begin, how it would feel, how it would be recognized by others. But God often dismantles those images, not to disappoint you, but to free you. He wants the relationship to be rooted in truth, not projection. So He strips away fantasy and replaces it with understanding. You begin to grasp that the person God chooses for you will not complete you. They will complement you. They will challenge you, sharpen you, and sometimes confront you. Love will require humility, communication, and daily choice. And because God has been preparing you, this realization doesn't scare you, it grounds you. You also realize that this union will require spiritual maturity from both sides. God is not just aligning hearts, He is aligning callings. And callings carry responsibility. They demand integrity behind closed doors, faith when emotions fluctuate, and commitment when feelings are tested. This is why God works so deeply within you before anything becomes visible. He knows that the world romanticizes love but rarely honors the discipline required to sustain it. So He teaches you how to love with wisdom before you ever love with proximity. There may be moments when doubt tries to resurface. Whispers that tell you you've waited too long. That you misheard God. That you should take control and make something happen. But these thoughts don't have the same power they once did. You recognize them as noise, not guidance. Because truth feels different now. Truth is calm. It doesn't rush. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't manipulate your fear of being alone. It simply stands firm and invites you to trust it. And you do. You trust that if God confirmed this person, He is capable of completing what He started. You trust that no distance, delay, or distraction can undo what He has ordained. And you trust that if adjustments are needed, God will make them without confusing you. This trust transforms how you love others in the meantime. You become more present, more compassionate, less transactional. You stop using people to fill voids. You honor their humanity without expecting them to replace what God has already promised. In doing so, you protect your heart, not by closing it, but by anchoring it. And one day, often when you're no longer counting, you realize that you are no longer waiting in the way you once were. You are living, fully, faithfully, intentionally. Your life is rich, purposeful, and grounded, regardless of what the next chapter holds. This is the greatest confirmation of all. That whatever God is preparing for you will add to your life, not rescue it. And when the moment of recognition finally unfolds, whether through a conversation, a reconnection, or a quiet understanding, it will feel natural. Unforced. Right. Not because everything is perfect, but because everything is aligned. You will look back at this season and see it clearly. Not as a test you barely survived, but as a sacred formation. Not as a delay, but as divine mercy. Not as confusion, but as careful preparation. And you will understand that love, when authored by God, is never random. It is revealed slowly, protected fiercely, and fulfilled faithfully, right on time.